All right, so today we're going deep on this crazy story about a hospital, just a normal hospital in Chicago that wanted to like expand, build a new building, and it turned into this whole massive corruption scandal. And we've got a bunch of stuff to go on, like articles and interviews, even court records. It's kind of wild, all about power and money and influence. You know how it goes.
It is pretty wild, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's really interesting about this case is how it shows how this whole world of hospital permits and this board, the Illinois Health Facilities Planning Board,
Mm-hmm.
how it all works. I mean, most people don't ever even think about that
Oh,
stuff.
right. Definitely not as exciting as like, Hollywood or something.
Yeah,
But
they're not.
trust me, this gets pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
So the main players here, the people we're going to be focusing on are Pam Davis and Bill Kottman, and they were executives at Edward Hospital, and they just wanted to build this new facility, for their community, a good thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And they'd done this before. They navigated the permit process before.
Yeah.
So they probably figured this expansion would be pretty straightforward, no big deal.
Well, that's where they were wrong. So to build this new hospital in Plainfield, they needed to get approval from this board, the Illinois Health Facilities Planning Board, and it's a pretty powerful board. They have the final say on like any healthcare project in the whole state.
Yeah, they can make or break a project, and that's where things start to get a little messy. Pam, she got this call right out of the blue from this guy, a bond financer named Nick Hirchin. And basically this guy tells her straight up that their project, it's not going to get approved unless they hire this specific construction company, Jacob Keverbaum Construction.
Wait, hold on. A bond financer telling them what construction company to use? Like what? That's super weird. Why would he even care about that? And what's so special about this Keverbaum Construction Company?
Yeah, it's definitely a huge red flag. Like alarm bells should be going off, right? It makes you think there's got to be something else going on, something bigger than just a normal permit approval process.
So Pam and Bill, I mean, they're not stupid, right? They could tell something wasn't right, but they decide to go ahead with the board meeting anyway. Present their plan, see what happens, and everything seemed to be going okay, I guess. And then, bam, their application, it gets denied.
Denied, just like that. And not just denied, it was denied for a medical office building, which Pam later said is like almost always approved, just a rubber stamp, basically. So it was a pretty clear sign that someone was trying to block them,
Okay, so at this point, they must be thinking, what in the world is going on? And to make things even worse, as they're leaving the meeting, guess who they run into? Jacob Heverbaum himself.
Oh, wow. Talk about a dramatic entrance.
Yeah, right. So Keverbaum, he goes up to Bill and he basically says, like, hey, I can make all your problems go away, but it'll cost you, like straight out of a mob movie.
Wow. That's a blatant shakedown.
So what do? Pam and Bill, I mean, they do something that most people wouldn't even think of. They decide to call the FBI.
Wow, really? I mean, that's a huge leap of faith, They're not investigators. They're hospital people. They probably had no idea what they were getting themselves into.
I know, right? And get this, at first, the FBI, they didn't even believe him. They're like, hospital permits? Seriously? That's what you're calling us about?
Yeah, I bet they thought it was a waste of their time.
But luckily for Pam and Bill, there was this one agent, Patrick Murphy. He agreed to meet with them, hear them out.
That was their lucky break, for sure.
And that meeting, oh man, that changed everything. Agent Murphy, he shows up at Pam's office early in the morning, ready to go, and he immediately starts wiring up her phones, her private line, the conference phone, the whole works, turned her office into like a secret FBI listening post.
Wow, that's when it all became real, huh?
Yeah, that's when their undercover operation really began, like they were in a spy movie or something. And their lives were about to change big time.
I bet.
So the first act in this whole drama, it was pretty intense. Pam, she's got Hirchin and Keverbaum right there in her office trying to, act normal while wearing a wire for the first time ever. And they're talking about the board meeting, practically bragging about how they knew it was going to be denied. And then suddenly her private line rings.
Oh, man, I bet that was nerve-wracking.
Right. It was Agent Murphy telling her to get those guys out of her office ASAP. So Pam, she has to think fast, and she comes up with this excuse, something about a family emergency at her kid's school, and somehow they believed her.
Wow. Talk about quick thinking.
Yeah, it was a close call, but it worked. And that crazy phone call, that was just the beginning. It was the start of this really stressful 8-month undercover investigation.
8 months? Wow, that's a long time to be living a double life.
Yeah, it was intense. 8 months of wearing wires, going to all these staged meetings, recording conversations, all while trying to, do their jobs and keep up with their personal lives too. And they had to act like they were in on this whole scheme, like they were incompetent and easy to manipulate.
I can't even imagine the mental toll that must have taken.
It was tough. And the worst part was they couldn't tell anyone what they were going through, not their coworkers, not their friends, not even their families.
Man, they must have felt really isolated.
They did, and they had to trust each other and the FBI completely. And there were some pretty awkward moments. Like one time, Pam's secretary walked in on an FBI agent, like hiding under her desk, messing with the phone lines.
Oh, wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it sounds kind of funny now, but I bet it wasn't funny at the time. But even with all the stress and the secrecy and the weird stuff happening, they kept going. Week after week, gathering evidence, recording those conversations, and trying to put all the pieces together to figure out how this whole corruption scheme worked.
And what they uncovered was huge, right? It went way beyond just the hospital board.
Yeah.
It ended up going way up high in Illinois politics.
Very high, yeah.
So as Pam and Bill kept digging, they started to think that this whole thing, it wasn't just about the hospital board. It was much bigger than that, maybe even connected to the governor's office.
You mean like the governor of Illinois? Wow.
Yeah, Governor Blagojevich. And remember that call that Pam got from Nick Hurchin, that bond financer?
Yeah, the one who told her to use Kiver bomb construction or they were going to like block their project. What was up with that guy?
Well, turns out he was connected to someone pretty high up in Blagojevich's inner circle, a guy named Tony Resco, who had a lot of influence over state boards, could pull some strings.
So it wasn't really about the construction company. It was about like using the hospital to get money and favors to the governor and his people.
Exactly. Classic corruption, And as the FBI was listening in on Pam and Bill's conversations, all those wired up meetings, they started to realize that this Resco guy, he was running a much bigger scheme. He was using his position to basically extort businesses, anyone who wanted a permit or a state contract. He'd demand bribes and campaign contributions, in exchange for his help.
Man, that's messed up. I mean, it's just a hospital permit, Who knew it could be used for all this shady stuff?
Right. It makes you wonder what else was going on. How many other projects were tainted by this kind of thing?
Yeah, seriously. So, what about Pam and Bill? I mean, they're the ones who exposed all of this.
Yeah, they were key to the whole investigation, but it definitely came at a price,
Yeah, I bet living that double life, always worried about being caught, that couldn't have been easy.
It was tough. They had to make some really hard choices, like they had to cancel a family vacation because it was at the same time as a meeting with the FBI.
Yeah.
And they couldn't even tell their families why,
Man, and they had to, like, distance themselves from their colleagues, too, right? In case they accidentally said something.
Yeah, they couldn't risk blowing their cover.
And all this time, they had to keep acting like they were part of the scheme, like they were okay with everything that was happening.
Right. They had to play the role, act like they were, incompetent, easily manipulated.
It's amazing they were able to pull it off for so long.
Yeah, it really shows how strong they were, their resilience.
Definitely. And then, after all those months of undercover work, the story, it finally broke in the Chicago Tribune, I think it was.
Whoa, so their cover was blown.
Yeah, someone leaked the details of the investigation.
Oh, man, that must have been a shock.
It was the FBI. They were furious. They weren't ready to go public yet. And for Pam and Bill, it meant that all of a sudden, everyone knew what they'd been doing, and they were in the spotlight.
Oh, wow. That must have been pretty intense.
It was. And people started, questioning them, criticizing them, saying they were arrogant, that they thought they were above the law, when really they were the ones who were trying to do the right thing.
It's crazy how that happens,
Yeah.
The people who were trying to help end up getting blamed.
I know. It must have been so frustrating for them because they couldn't even defend themselves. They couldn't say, hey, we're the good guys here.
Yeah.
Because of the investigation.
Yeah, they had to just stay quiet and wait for the truth to come out.
And did it.
It did, eventually. The FBI, they had enough evidence to go after Blagojevich and all his people. It was a huge scandal, made national news,
Wow, so their undercover work actually helped to bring down a governor. That's incredible.
It is. And they got a call from the FBI, like the day before the arrests, just to let them know that, that their efforts were going to pay off. But I think their real reward was seeing those guys get what they deserved, justice being served.
Even though it cost them a lot personally, right?
Yeah, it did.
What happened to them after everything was over? I mean, they never got to build their hospital, right?
No, they had to abandon the whole project. The political climate was just, it was too toxic.
Yeah.
And the project was kind of tainted by, by the whole scandal.
So they risked everything, exposed all this corruption, and then they couldn't even achieve their original goal.
It's kind of a bittersweet ending.
Hmm.
They did the right thing, but it cost them a lot.
It makes you think about the choices we make, and what happens when we try to do what's right, even when it's hard.
Yeah. It's not always easy, that's for sure.
So what about Blagojevich and his cronies? What happened to them? And did anything actually change in Illinois politics after all of this?
Those are good questions, and we'll get into all that after a quick break, so stay tuned. Yeah, so Blagojevich and his crew, they definitely faced some serious consequences.
Like what? What happened to them?
Well, Blagojevich, he ended up getting convicted on a bunch of corruption charges, including trying to sell Obama's old Senate seat. Can you believe that?
Whoa, seriously, that's like next level corruption.
Yeah, and he was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison.
14 years, wow.
Yeah, and a bunch of his associates, like Tony Resco, they also got prison time.
So they didn't get away with it, that's good.
Nope, definitely not. And it kind of sent a message, like, hey, if you're going to abuse your power like that, you're going to get caught.
Makes you wonder, though, did anything actually change in Illinois politics after all this?
It definitely had an impact, for sure. There's a big push for ethics reform. And they started looking more closely at how these state boards operate, trying to make things more transparent, harder to pull those shady deals.
Yeah. But isn't that kind of like, putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg? I mean, systems can always be gamed, right? There are always loopholes.
Yeah, true. It's a tough problem, but I think a big part of it is transparency, making sure that everything's out in the open, making it harder for those backroom deals to happen in the first place.
Then making it easier for people to speak up if they see something wrong, like Pam and Bill did. I mean, their story really shows how important whistleblowers are.
Yeah, for sure. They're the ones who shine a light on the bad stuff, even though it can be, really risky for them personally.
It's funny, though, because we always think of whistleblowers as these, like, crusaders, people who are on a mission to expose the truth no matter what. But Pam and Bill, they weren't like that. They just wanted to build a hospital.
Right. They got caught up in this whole mess by accident, basically. But they still had the courage to do the right thing, even when it got really tough.
Yeah, that's what makes their story so inspiring, I think. It makes you think about, like, what would you do in that situation? Would you have the guts to speak up, even if it meant risking everything?
It's a tough question, for sure. But it's one we all got to ask ourselves, I think.
This whole deep dive, it's been pretty eye-opening. It's not just about a hospital or even about a corrupt governor. It's about the choices we make, the systems we live in, and whether we're willing to challenge those systems when they're broken.
Yeah, and it shows that anyone can be a force for change, even if they don't set out to be.
Right, like Pam and Bill, they just wanted to build a hospital, and they ended up changing the course of Illinois politics. Pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and maybe even a little inspiring.
Yeah, we hope it'll make you think about the choices you make and the world around you. And maybe, just maybe, it'll inspire you to be a little more like Pam and Bill, ready to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Thanks for listening, everyone.